settles down. Okay. I just logged in. So when you come on, I'll hang up. Okay, bye.
And enmity, all jealousy and vying for supremacy. Fulfill the yearning of all the people of our country to speak proudly in its honor. Fulfill their desire to see it become a light to all nations. Therefore, may it be your will that our land should be a blessing to all inhabitants of the globe. Cause to dwell among all peoples friendship and freedom, and soon fulfill the vision of your prophets. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation. Let them learn no longer ways of war. And we say, Amen. Welcome once again, everyone. Thank you all for being here tonight. It is a real joy to be with you and to be able to hold in our hands some wonderful new poetry liturgy that is the subject of our gathering this evening and for the next 2 weeks, and then following the first 2 weeks in February. For the next hour, we're going to turn our attention to the question of liturgy and liturgical change, and specifically the work that's been offered to us by Herbert Levine, who's with us here tonight and who will be here with us in 2 weeks. And in just a few minutes, Herb, I'm going to turn it over to you, but I want to say a few words of introduction and sort of explanation and kind of give us a roadmap. So I have, by the way, Herb, I didn't even tell you, I don't think, I have screen shares of the creation elements that we wanted to look at tonight. So I can pull those up on screen, but I don't know how many people might have actually acquired their own copy of this wonderful little book. So if you have yours, you may want to have it handy. But if you don't worry, we have copies to share. So I'd like to just start with a very short personal introduction about why this topic of liturgical change and innovation has become so important to me, and I think important for all of us in every tradition, but certainly in Jewish tradition. I think for me, it started as a teen when the synagogue that my family belonged to called up and said, you had your bat mitzvah, you like to sing, could you please learn Kabbalat Shabbat? And when the cantor's away, you could lead it. And I, at the age of, I don't know, maybe 15, said to my parents, I really would rather not do this. They said, you'll put on a skirt. It's an honor to be asked, and off you go. And so I found myself standing there with a siddur in hand, serving as shlichat tzibur, and mostly feeling either I have no idea what I'm saying, or the little bit that I do understand in the English is at best alienating to me. There isn't much here that I can grab a hold of and feel at home inside of. And as I learned the liturgy more, I found that there was a lot more room there for me in the traditional liturgy, else how could I have spent my whole life doing this? But that, I think, is where my own interest in liturgical change started. And then not long after that, I wandered into a Da'at Shalom on a Friday evening and was just overwhelmed with the beauty of some simple modern translations of the traditional liturgy. Aleinu sticks in my head especially. And I think one of the great blessings of being part of our community has been an ongoing openness and curiosity about spiritual practice vis-a-vis liturgy. How much do we feel ourselves harnessed to, tethered to maybe the traditional liturgical canon, and how much do we feel that we have the space to explore and to adapt and modify? And of course, we've been guided by that so much by the work of the Reconstructionist movement, starting with Mordechai Kaplan and Ira Eisenstein, and many others who were in that first generation of editors and writers, and on down through the generations. I think you're all of you here tonight are familiar with some of the really big liturgical emendations that the Reconstructionist movement enacted. I'll just mention them just to review together. The removal of the language that refers to the doctrine of divine election. So any place that says Bachar banu mikol amim, ukivanu vacharta, anytime we hear that word livchor, to choose, that's put aside, it's set aside, and something else is inserted instead, something that better reflects the values of the Reconstructionist Jewish approach. And of course, in the Aleinu, which our ancestors crafted to say, thank you, God, for not making us like all the other peoples of the world, and for not making our portion as them. And of course, in the fully traditional version, really disparaging the Goyim by saying they bow down to nothingness and emptiness. We don't say any of those words. In the reconstructed version, we simply say we were given the Torah and we were given a portion of eternity, of eternal life. And that's good enough for us. Certainly have felt grateful over many years. I'll say that over the years when Jonathan or I have thought, well, would you ever want to be in a conservative synagogue? My answer has always been, but then I'd have to say the Iki Aleinu, which I never ever want to have to say. I don't think there's a way to reconstruct that without truly changing it. So just to bring us up to where we are tonight, I want to suggest that we understand liturgy and the practice of liturgy kind of as the reciprocal, the reciprocal of regular speech, of normal speech, in this way. In regular speech, what happens? We have a thought. That thought might even be in response to something we've heard or a conversation, or it could be in response to anything. But the thought originates inside of us. Our brain translates that thought into language, and then we say what we have to say. So the direction is flowing out. With liturgy, it's the reciprocal. With liturgy, we take words that were given to us, like put on a plate and here's what to say, and you put it in your mouth. And you put it in your mouth because you want it to impact your soul, your mind, your heart, your consciousness. So in a way, it's very much like eating. I mean, in the same way that you think about what you're going to eat. Some of us are on different kinds of diets, special diets that we want to follow because we believe they're good for our bodies. Maybe we believe they're good for other things, other parts of us. That's the same with liturgy. So it really matters what we say. It really matters because when we put words of prayer in our mouth, we're doing it as an aspiration. When we pray, we're saying, this is what we aspire to. This is what we hope to be. And so we want to aspire to things that we really actually do aspire to. So that's what leads us to tonight and to the opportunity to look at some really new versions of liturgy. Herb, I would like to just say one more thing before I turn it over to you. I had the opportunity this past Monday morning at a clergy conference to facilitate a session similar to this on this work. And I talked with the group Monday just about sort of thinking through the different techniques for liturgical emendation or liturgical change. We want to approach it carefully, right? We don't want to just say, well, we don't believe that anymore, so we're just not saying any of that. We want to really think, how can we engage with the tradition we've been given and change it lovingly, change it responsibly, change it so that, as Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi would say, it's still backwards compatible. You know, your new files will still work in your old hardware, something like that. Here are some of the different ways I talked with these colleagues on Monday, different techniques for approaching how to do liturgical change. One might be just completely borrowing from another source. taking something from another source altogether and bringing it into our canon. And I'll give you an example of that, something that has become a favorite of mine, and I hope some of you, in our service when we sing, "Where there is light in the soul, there is beauty in the person. Where there is beauty in the person, there is harmony in the home. Where there is harmony in the home, there is honor in the nation. Where there is honor in the nation, there is peace in the world." And we sometimes link that then to Ose Shalom, so to try to connect it to our words. So that's one example of how we might go about this project. Another example is just in coming up with different kinds of translations which help us see the original Hebrew in new ways. And I would lift up some of the translations that we've gotten, especially from Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi. I'm not going to put up any examples now, but he's written several translations, especially most famously the Shema, the middle section of the Shema, that really shift the way we read the Hebrew. So that's not changing the words per se, but it's changing the way we understand the words. And then there's rewriting the words themselves. And so I would lift up the work done by Marcia Falk, which Rabbi Fred is going to focus on in the 2 sessions in February, where she has eliminated the word you. So if in a traditional formula, we would say Baruch Atah, blessed are you. She's simply eliminated that and done so as an answer to the problem, one theological problem that formula brings up. So in her formula, it says simply, we bless the source of life who has given us this bread, or we bless the source of life who has put this fruit on the vine, etc. And then we land with the work that's in our hands tonight, which is to say, what if we could approach our theological conundrum, and I guess I'm using that in a very broad sense, and maybe Herb, you'll say more about that, by rewriting what we have to say, still couching it in the language of our people, the language of Hebrew, in this case, modern Hebrew, but offering completely new language, new formula to express what we want to say in our gratitude, in our lament, in our appreciation. So that was my, that's what I had to say by way of introduction. And I was gonna say one last thing, which is we wanted to focus, we have 3 sessions. So we want to focus on creation, revelation, and redemption. And so tonight will be the first one, focusing on creation, liturgy of creation.
Thank you, Rabbi Rachel. It's a huge honor to be invited into this gathering. Adat Shalom is a synagogue that's dear to my heart. I have many friends on the screen. The Nileses are dear friends here, where I am in Pelican Cove in Florida. And some of you have studied with me for many long years. We have Martha Hare and Steve Isaacson. And I see others who just had a taste of me as a teacher and did not make a commitment, Jesse Abraham and Hannah Weisberger. It's nice to see you again. Just when my book came out 3 years ago, Marcia Teichman invited me down to give a talk, and we agreed on the talk I was going to give was how Kol HaNeshama has an alternative theology running inside the pages of the book if you look at the poems. If you look at the poem by Rami Shapiro, "We Are Loved by an Unending Love," that you probably sing on many Erev Shabbat, services, there's nothing about God in there. And yet there is this feeling of uplift and connection and transcendence, and comfort that emerges from that poem. And there were many other examples. Faith Rogow's "As We Bless the Source of Life, So We Are Blessed," which has become an intro to the Baruch Hu. Um, there's something from Rami Shapiro. Rachel tells us on page 61, and I went through the poems. I also went through some of the kavanot, and as somebody who had a lot of exposure to Kaplan and Reconstructionism through some years that I spent at the RRC, I was very aware of the issues that Rabbi Rachel raised about Reconstructionists wanting to be very exact about their language. But in the end, the changes that were made were really around the edges, because the fundamental issue is the issue of agency. Who is doing the action? Is there a God that is outside us that is acting in the world? And for me, what I want from what I got from religious discourse, from liturgy, is a feeling. I was looking for a way to express awe. I was looking for a way to express gratitude. I was looking for a way to express a sense of responsibility, to keep doing what's good and right in the world, to affirm all those things. But I wanted my prayers to pass the truth test. And there's no way that I could sit in a Reconstructionist shul or a conservative shul and feel that my language, that the language of the prayer book passed the truth test for me. Because of this issue of agency. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. And whatever and the most sort of extreme example of it is, who bringeth forth bread from the earth. And it's so obvious that we bring forth bread from the earth. Even when Rabbi Rachel said about the Aleinu, and said, we substitute the phrase, we were given the Torah. Well, the truth is that we weren't given the Torah. We created the Torah. So how could we create a liturgy that would say we created the Torah? You're going to look at my Torah poems next week. How could we create a liturgy that honors Darwin and Einstein? That was the task that I set myself. It was in response to a piece in Tikkun magazine, as I explained in the afterword to the book, by Shaul Magid, who is a emeritus professor at Dartmouth and who writes in Tablet a lot. And you may have, if you're a reader of Tablet, you may know his stuff.
Shaul, Herb, I'll just jump in here. Shaul Magid was going to be our Shabbaton speaker last year, literally just as the pandemic started.
Well, he's a great scholar, and one could learn a lot from him. In any case, he said he wasn't speaking to the Reconstructionist movement. He was speaking to the Jewish Renewal movement, those descended from Zalman Schachter Shalomi, who also taught at RRC and is very close to Reconstructionism. And he said, where is the liturgy that expresses Reb Zalman's theology of Gaia? So what is Gaia, and what is the Gaia hypothesis? In the 1970s, Gaia is the name of a Greek name for Earth. Gaia is one of the goddesses before Zeus. She's contemporary with Kronos, god of time, and the Gaia hypothesis, in short, was that the world is uh, a feedback loop. The world is a giant feedback loop, a biological organism in which all the species are giving feedback to the earth about how the earth is doing and providing for them. They co-evolve with the earth, and that we as a species are the knowing species, the species that knows how to know, the species that is conscious, and we are sort of in charge of collecting all the feedback, if you will, from all of the species and doing the right thing vis-a-vis the planet. That was in the 1970s. It was before its time, clearly, even before Al Gore wrote Earth in the Balance, which probably a lot of you read in 1988. But this was back in the mid 70s that we were getting this sense of the Gaia hypothesis, that the world was one large communication system, that that we were necessary. We were a necessary part of the feedback loop. And Reb Zalman said, if Gaia is God, then we are God's vanguard. We, the Jews, who have this sense of unity, of oneness. And the oneness was all of a sudden, and I would argue that the crucial moment for all of us was 1969. July 1969, what happened? What happened in July 1969? Exactly. The satellite went around the Earth, and for the first time we saw what the Earth looked like from outer space. And what an astonishing breakthrough moment that was for the people that has been espousing unity since day one, or day 3000 BCE. So I wanted my poems to express that, to pass that truth test, that we are a planet sitting in space, spinning around, that it's a wonder that we exist, that gravity exists to allow us to stand upright on a spinning planet. It's a wonder that we, with all our culture and creations, descended from apes that came down from the trees. It's a wonder that we continue to be a force for compassion in a world full of conflict. I wanted to be able to express all of that. And because of the education I had and the parents I had, I wanted to be able to express that in both my languages, in English and in Hebrew. I feel like a dinosaur with respect to Hebrew, because I had an education that few American Jews get anymore. 6 summers of Hebrew speaking summer camp, an Orthodox summer camp, where at age 9.5, for the first time, I heard Song of Songs chanted on a Friday night in Hebrew. Shir HaShirim Asher Lishlomo Yishakeni Min Shikot Pihu Ki Tovim Dodecha Mi'ayin. I was transported to another world. Hebrew was the language in which my soul developed, my soulfulness developed. I could not express the language of my soul only in English. English is a Christian language. It's been shaped by Christianity. We say charity. Where's charity from? Charity is from the Latin caritas, meaning heart. In Hebrew, we say tzedakah. Tzedakah is from tzedek, justice. And the two words are supposed to translate one another, but they're nothing like one another. So I came from a small little, my parents both went to a Hebrew teachers college, and they had this sense, the whole college had this sense that they were going to create a group of intellectuals in America who were as at home in Hebrew as they were in English. It was a Fafalana project. It was not to be. Kayla had a taste of the same at the Teachers Institute in New York, where Mordechai Kaplan had founded. So really, to honor where I came from is, and my parents had both passed at the time I started writing these poems. So there's a filial piety. There's an aspect of filial piety in my use of Hebrew that I cannot escape from, and that I honor, that I am deeply. And my Hebrew is not perfect, and different Israelis who read it disagree about whether you should use the preposition be or le with this verb, and I end up having to choose. But it's a pleasure for me to have had the opportunity, and the idea that these are getting used not only in Adat Shalom but in other places, from which I've gotten reports from Reform synagogues, from Renewal, from Conservative, is extremely thrilling. So my current project is to take the 2 books of poems I've written and reorganize them according to the order of the Siddur, and add some new ones for pieces that are missing, so that I'm creating a Siddur alternativi, kind of a Siddur, a spiritual Siddur that is for a new age. So I can stop right there. That's sort of by way of intro, and just take any comments or questions before we look into particular poem. I've said enough. Anybody?
Anybody want to chime in with a question or a thought before we look at some of these passages?
Yeah, it's a conflict with me and others as to how far you can go without breaking the chain that we have to the rest of the Jewish world. I mean, many of us go to synagogue partly to be connected with Jews all over. So this is not an original thought by any stretch of the imagination, but the question is,
hear you.
How much can you pull the rubber band before it snaps?
It's a real problem. It's a real challenge, because we want to stay connected to our people. And in fact, as you're saying, Stan, we come to synagogue, and often that's why we come, because we want to be connected to the rest of our people. So we want to, as I said before, handle liturgical change gently, carefully. And I guess I want to make sure to convey to all of you, as captivated as I've been by a lot of this work that Herb has shared with us. No one's planning a Siddur revolution at Adat Shalom. We're still going to use Kol HaNeshama or whatever Siddur.
Right. I'm just imagining it as a little book, that could be in the pews behind the, you never know. Stan, we met in Florida last year, just before the pandemic. It's nice to see you again. So let's put up the text of the first big poem.
So Herb, what I have to screen share is part 2 of the first one.
Okay, so okay, so let me.
Will you read, or do you want me?
No, let me read. Let me read the part 1 to get to there first.
So for anybody that has the book, you are on page 2 and 3.
So this is before. So the poem is called "Blessed Are You, World," and in Hebrew, Baruch Atah Olam. So I just want to say one for the Kabbalists in the room. That's Martha. I don't know if there's any others. Have you all heard of gematria? Gamma equals tria. Gamma is the third letter, and so Gimel equals 3, gematria. So Hebrew counts as an alphabet and as a numerical system. And so in Kabbalah, you discover that the name Elohim means the same, equals the same as the word for nature, teva. Now, why would they have told us that? Why would they have discovered that if it wasn't deeply important to the tradition to understand that God and nature are one? In which case, Spinoza's heresy was no heresy, but was deep in Kabbalah. That's A with an aleph. Okay, I just want to say that for those for whom that might make a difference. In the archives of Kibbutz Beit Hashita, I discovered forgotten handwritten notes for a Passover Seder from 1927. Instead of the Kiddush, the author wrote, "Blessed are you, Kibbutz." In his footsteps, I widen the blessing circle and say, "Blessed are you, world, to praise your fragile, complex beauty." That moment when I discovered that I could say Baruch Atah Olam in Hebrew was a revelation. It was a revelation. And Rabbi Rachel has said that for her, saying it feels deeply Jewish because of the Baruch Atah. Let's put up number 2. So this is a poem in 8 parts, and we're going to look at, Rabbi Rachel's going to screen share.
I have part 2 and part 3 in separate little screen
Okay.
share segments, and I have the closing bracha also.
Okay.
Okay. So here comes part 2. Oh, Audrey, can you make me a co-host or enable screen sharing or something? You can do it on the security button. Hang on just a second, folks. Okay. Here's the next stanza.
Okay.
Can you all see that?
So we'll read it in both Hebrew and English. If you call the earth your mother who birthed you in pain from the wombs of the mothers from Eve until now, if you call the world your friend who upholds you, whether in a day of trouble or of joy, if you call the universe your helpmeet who gives strength to both your weakness and your might, then join with me in these songs and we'll sing together in a world that fills our springs with blessings. Im tikre'i la'adama em sheholida otach be'etzev, merachamei ha'imahot mechava ad achshav, im tikra la'olam chaver shetomech becha biyom tzara uviyom simcha, אם תקראי ליקום עזר כנגדך, הנותן כוח לחולשתך וגם לעוצמתך, אז תצטרף אליי בשירים אלה, ונשירה יחד בעולם שממלא מעיינותינו ברכות. Rabbi Chazan, Rachel, could you daven that in Hebrew to any melody of your...
Yes.
To a nusach-like melody?
Yes. Can you hear me or am I muted?
We can hear you.
You can hear me. I can't even tell. Okay. Yeah, I had experimented with this a little bit to try to figure out if I could, as Herb is saying, like to daven this in nusach. So if I as I shared with Herb and some of you, to me, this passage wants to be in the the early part of the service in the morning, really
So-
because of the phrase that says, "Adz tistaref elai b'shirim ela," join with me. It's, as Herb, as you said, it's a reshut. It's like a, if, with your permission, let's begin.
Right. It's an intro to Psuke de Zimra.
Yeah. So that's exactly where I've put it a couple of times since we've had it at Adat Shalom. And this is completely improvising, but came out something like this. Im tikre'i le'adama em sheholida otach be'etzev merachamei ha'imahot mechava ad achshav. Im tikra le'olam chaver shetomech becha beyom tzara ubeyom simcha. אם תקראי ליקום עזר כנגדך, הנותן כוח לחושתך וגם לעצמתך, אז תצטרף אליי בשירים אלה, ונשיר יחד בעולם שממלא מעיינותינו ברכות. So that's I feel like I have to give a disclaimer.
No, that was very beautiful. And
it's fine. It's not, as Mim Eisenstein would say to me, very nice, but we can't sing with you. It's not a melody. So
no. But
something
that
else so we can sing it together.
there's a place for davening, and some of these can be set to those sorts of melodies. The text might have to be shortened somewhat. But if you just look at the structure of this, you'll see why it lends itself to being prayerful, to being liturgical. If, then. If, then. And so you have a couplet, and then a triplet. And the Hebrew gives you the im, az. Rachel has brought a new dimension to it. And so let's look at the next piece.
Well, Herb, before you jump off of this, just for those that may not get the references right away, would you
Sure.
highlight some of the biblical references that are here?
Sure. Well, everybody has heard of Eve.
Right.
And the womb is a wonderful word in Hebrew because it's the same root as our word for compassion. So rachamei is the word for wombs, and rachamim is the word for compassion. The ezer kenegdech, if you call the universe your helpmeet, that is Eve vis-a-vis Adam is called an ezer kenegdech. So the Eve reference is the primary one, and Eve's role is taken over by the earth. And so the earth is our mother is a very common trope in Western thought. And there's no reason that it can't be in Jewish thought as well, even though Jewish thought emerged as a way of overturning matriarchy. So it feels like I'm returning to the Godhead, if you will, some of its feminine earthiness.
Thank you, Yasher Koach. Before we go on, I just want to point out, if you go to your Siddur, your Kol HaNeshama Siddur, everyone, if you have it in hand, and you turn to page 177, which is where we have printed Baruch She'amar, the traditional formula, you'll recognize there below the line an older English interpretation of Baruch She'amar, which picks up on some of the same things that Herb has developed here, but it's in English only. And I've had, over the years, multiple times a machloket, like a friendly disagreement, hopefully for a higher purpose, with Rabbi Sid, specifically about this English below the line here, because he has several times said to me, why don't we use this more often? It's so beautiful and it's so evocative, and it gives us a different relationship with the feminine and so on. And I've said, yeah, it's nice, but there's no Hebrew. And I like for us to have Hebrew in our prayers when we can. So, okay, Dibarti.
Nice, thank you.
So can I go on now?
Yes, please.
Okay, bear with me. I have these not in a flowing file, so I have to close this and bring up a different one.
That's how you screen share.
Yeah, well, I believe there's even a.
Oh, well, yeah, you'd have to put it in one file. Okay.
Okay, hang on.
Nicht gefährlich.
You go away now. Here. Okay. And I do that.
Thank you, whoever just wrote. And my own note, Springs, is one of Marcia Falk's key images that you'll find. And I honor Marcia for paving the way. So this is number 3 in a sequence of 8. And this is my testimony to 1969, my visionary appreciation of that moment. Planet orbiting the sun from time's beginning till its end. Planet blue, green, and white. Planet covered with water and land and sky. Planet made of forests, lakes and seas, fields and sandy beaches. Planet Earth that we have seen from space, complete and alive before our astonished eyes. I think it's important for me in terms of the truth test to put in from time's beginning till its end, because if you've read your physics, you know that we live in an expanding universe that is going to end at some point. And it might spring back on itself and create another Big Bang, and the whole kit and caboodle will start all over again. And in liturgy, we have a way of pretending, Olam Va'ed, is that there is really the certainty of forever and ever, forever after. So, Kadur sovev et hashemesh mitchilat hazman ad sofo, Kadur kachol yarok v'lavan, Kadur kasui mayim adama v'shamayim, Kadur asui yarot agamim v'yamim sadot v'cholot, Kadur haaretz sherainu otcha mehachalal, Shalem v'chai lifnei einenu hanid hamot. The Hebrew is pretty simple. It's, I don't know what Ulpan level it is, but one of the things about the style that evolved for this book is that I could only say in English what I could also say in Hebrew, and my Hebrew is way less sophisticated than my English. So it allowed me to write a direct kind of English that when I'm writing poems of my own in English, this would seem kind of too plain. But for liturgy, plain is good.
Right, simple is
Better.
I want to just add that I found as I rolled this around in my mouth, just saying the word kadur, ball, is so much more captured the sense of wonder that you described from 1969. It has a different feel than the word planet. I can't exactly say why, but like the idea of it's just a blue marble. That's where we're living together.
And Shulamit just made a comment here to everyone, which I believe is true. I think the poems are much richer in Hebrew than they are in English. They're fine in English, and sometimes, even a little better than fine. But the Hebrew is alive on so many levels because of its associativeness, and that's true of Hebrew in general. Bialik gave a speech in the 1920s to the academy that was charged with guarding the language. And he said, don't give up on the sacredness of Hebrew, because Hebrew has these sacred associations. They're inescapable to anyone who's read the Bible. They're, so Psalms are full of language like Adama v'shamayim. That's a good Psalm phrase. So the poem goes on from there. there's another creation piece, which I'd like to read. This is number 6 in the poem. They say that our life began through a crack in the ocean floor, through which heat rose and still rises from the molten core of the earth and catalyzed the salty waters, giving birth to the amino acids, in them the history of life in the sea, on land, and in the air. The psalmist sings, "With you is the source of life." Every day I too acknowledge the source of life that still enlivens my breath. The psalmist says, "With you is the source of life." Whatever enlivens my breath is the source of life for me. So I'm subtly saying this is a psalm. This is a psalm-like poem, but it's not the same. I don't share the same, I don't live in the same cosmology, theology as the psalmists of old. And so to get back to Stan's point, I think that a tradition that keeps saying words that it doesn't believe in is doomed to get hollowed out from within. And so I think that's the other side of your question. Your question is, how far can we stretch the rubber band without other Jews feeling like they're walking into something, that they know? Now, of course, Reconstructionism is no longer in Cherem, but Kaplan's changes got him into Cherem, got him excommunicated, right, from the world that he cared about, the Orthodox world that he came from. So having been excommunicated, hell, why not go all the way, So I honor Rabbi Rachel's boldness and Rabbi Fred's boldness for bringing this stuff to you. And so anybody want to jump into that conversation?
Yeah, I want to. We have just about 10 minutes left, and I want to make some space for comments, questions, and I see there have been some excellent things that people have shared in the chat. Some of you have written to me, a couple of you have been writing to me. If you feel comfortable sharing your questions with the larger group, I think it would be excellent. And I want to say, I think challenging questions are welcome. It's okay. We're not putting this out so everyone can go, yay, I love this, and let's just use this. But if I could, I'd like to just share one more thing with you that really, Herb, echoes what you were just saying about intellectual honesty, which is a challenge with a liturgy that's been with us for more than 2,000 years. I mean, it's really unbelievable when you stop and think. Our liturgy, most of it, including the creation liturgy, was composed before Copernicus. I mean, before even that cosmological, change, and not to mention the ones that we've been living through in more recent decades. So let's see if I could just quickly, I want to just share this with you. Let's see if we do this, will that work? Yeah. Okay, so this is Mordechai Kaplan from the book, The Meaning of God in Modern Jewish Religion. We may have to revise our liturgy to express with greater truth what we sincerely think and feel when we have God in mind, but we cannot dispense with worship. The departure from the traditional idea of God as a self-existent entity necessarily changes the function of prayer, but by no means destroys it. Ever since philosophy invaded the field of Jewish religion, it became difficult to pray in the spirit of those who had never been troubled by philosophic scruples. But this does not alter the fact that any affirmative conception of God must necessarily find expression in prayer. And I'll pause there. He says much more about this, just this real tension between, again, holding on to our legacy, our tradition, and also making sure to renew it so that we can still hold on to it. So some time for questions. Maybe would people be willing to use the raise hand? Just much easier to see when you use that, and that way we can make sure to catch.
Luther, Audrey,
Yeah, maybe we'll go ahead and start with Luther.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Mr. Levine, you should know that I also write poetry occasionally. And I'm struggling with what to me is just yet another metaphor. And it's a good metaphor. It's a nice metaphor. But Gaia is still a metaphor. And I worry about concretizing this metaphor and in essence personifying it, which I think is what you're trying to get away from, a personification of this concept that we don't really have good names for. So I just want to kind of say
Okay.
I'm really struggling with the concept of praying to Gaia.
Good. I'm going to hear all the questions and then figure out how to answer them. Audrey.
So mine is somewhat similar, that my mom taught me that I can think whatever I want, but I have to be careful what I say. And I use that when we're praying together, that if we are all saying different things because we have a million words for God, or we have a million words for this or that, we're like, I've used a better, we're like the Tower of Babel, and we're not praying together, and we're not sharing that kind of common experience. So I wonder, especially like using different forms of gender when we're praying, and having permission to do that, it just sounds like a cacophony of just nonsense, and we're not sharing anything. And I just wonder what you would think about that.
Okay. I'm looking at the next page and I see Haya and David.
Thank you. I have two questions. The first one is also a theological question, and this is, Kaplan didn't say that we substitute nature with God. He said that you can find the power for salvation through nature. And as somebody who doesn't believe in God, I don't see the alternative for making the godly inspiration to a paganist-like understanding of the world, to go back to Gaia, or to go back to the plant. I mean, I can be inspired by looking at Earth, but I wouldn't feel that this somehow replaces something that I can't even call a name. The other question I have has to do with the Hebrew. And if we can go into details, I mean, I can.
Well, let's say that.
Everybody's so bored, but I find some things about the Hebrew that I would like to talk to you about.
Yeah, that every Israeli has a different sense of how I can improve the Hebrew.
I didn't say that.
Yeah, no, I'm teasing. David.
Well, I have so many questions. The first one I'll say is add to the list of things you want to respond to Stan's question earlier, because I think it's profound, which is the further out we go on these limbs, the further we get from Klal Yisrael, the unity of the Jewish people. And even things that make complete sense, like calling God Ehyeh, which our Rabbi Fred has been doing, or Havaya, nobody else uses that word. So we take ourselves too far out. And I guess the other question is, at what point does this theology get so far away from what most people would consider Judaism, which involves a covenant between us and God, where God is something other than us? Mm-hmm. I guess I'm taking issue with your starting point, which is, if we don't believe in God, how should we rewrite the prayers? And I say, well, if I do believe in God, how can I sit in the room if this is the prayer that we're using?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let me take those four. Can we go till 7:15? Oh, till 8:15? Is we can't? So we didn't plan our time well. So very quickly.
We have 2 more weeks, so if we don't.
So very quickly, the you. I think you is essential to prayer. So my using the personification is necessary. for me if it's going to be prayer. In the kibbutz, you get things like mivorach adam, blessed is the human. And I think that's just rhetorical. I think that the prayerful nature of what distinguishes prayer poems from other kind of poems is the you, the ability to say you to the, and I'm saying you to the universe because I have concluded that if we don't make the universe holy, we can't save the universe from ourselves. We are destroying our relationship to the earth, and it's only the holiness of the earth. I think part of the problem is that we've made holy something that's separate from the earth, the idea of a supernatural God. I think that's part of our problem. A. B, languages change. Maimonides would walk into Adat Shalom and would not recognize this as his Judaism, and the Baal Shem Tov would not recognize it as his Judaism. And so Kaplan described us as an evolving religious civilization, and if we're gonna evolve, then we're evolving. Let us evolve. And language change is part of that evolution. To go to the question from Chaya, paganism has gotten a bad rap because I'm by no means the first Jewish first Jewish poet to elevate paganism. Chernyakhovsky and the Kanaananim did it in the 20s, and Chernyakhovsky did it, Lifnei Pesel Apollo, was his testimony. I don't think that it is pagan because it ends up in, it is not other than us because it suffuses Kabbalah, the idea of God and nature being one. That Tselem Elokim, which we associate just with humanity, throughout Kabbalah includes all of the creatures. All the creatures are in Tselem Elohim. And that's why Elohim equals Teva. As far as David goes, you have to decide where you want to pray. You have to have a shul that you don't go to and a shul that you do go to. And the shul that you're going to is edgy. The shul that you're going to is edgy, has edgy rabbis. And there's something about their edginess that is essential to their vitality, so that they do not just become cogs replicating an ancient liturgy that would have us all conform to its image. So if you love them, then give them a chance to challenge you and push you. Those are the 4 questions I heard.
Yeah, I think that's it for tonight, but that we can continue this conversation, and we should. And I really appreciate people raising these questions. Just Larry chimed in to say, can we not just appreciate this work for what it is and not necessarily have to feel that it's going to come into the Siddur? Of course, the answer is for sure, yes. I know that we said we'd end at 8. I would like to just say Kaddish to end together. I don't know if anyone here tonight is saying Kaddish in memory of someone. If you are, I invite you to stand. I'd like to say the Scholars Kaddish, which is in our Shabbat Siddur on page 173. It's on page 173. And invite anyone who is observing a yort site or in mourning to please stand. And page 173. Yitkadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah Ve'alma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon v'yomechon v'chaye dechol beit Yisrael v'agala v'zman kari v'imramen. Yehi shmei rabba mevorach le'alam u'lamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpo'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitale v'yithalal shemei dekudsha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Al Yisrael ve'al Rabbanan ve'al Talmidehon ve'al kol Talmidei Talmidehon ve'al kol manda oskin be'oraita. Di ba'atra hadain v'di b'chol atar ve'atar. Yehe lahon u'lachon shlama rabba. China v'chista v'rachamim v'chayin arichin u'mezunei revichei u'furkana min kodam avuhon di v'shmaya. Ve'ara v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shamaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen. Next week, looking at Revelation and what our relationship is to the tefillot around the Torah, and more questions about creation if you like. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you to Audrey Lyon for being our host tonight. And of course, thank you to Herb Levine for being with us tonight and for bringing us this work.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. I'm going to hang out here if anybody wants to check in. Otherwise, see you all soon. And Chodesh Tov. We begin a new month tonight.